On June 2, 2010, a journeyman pitcher got 26 batters out in a row, and then lost a perfect game to a single wrong word. The wrong word came from an umpire. And the strangest part of this story is what the umpire did next. His name was Armando Galarraga. Outside the city of Detroit, almost nobody knew it, and almost nobody had any reason to. He was not a star. He was a 28-year-old from Venezuela who had spent his career bouncing between the major leagues and the minors. A fifth starter. A roster arm. The kind of pitcher a team keeps around to eat innings and forgets about the moment he's gone. The year before, his numbers had been ordinary. The year of this game, they were worse. He had been sent down to the minors that very spring and only recently called back up. He was pitching, quite literally, to keep his job. So no one in the half-empty stands at Comerica Park expected history on a quiet Wednesday night in June. The Cleveland Indians were in town. The Tigers were fine, not great. It was the kind of midweek game that disappears from memory before the season ends. Then Galarraga started throwing. And the Cleveland batters started walking back to their dugout, one after another, after another. 3 up, 3 down. Then again. Then again. By the middle innings, the scoreboard was telling a story that didn't belong to a pitcher like him. No hits. No walks. No errors. No Cleveland runner had reached first base. Not one. In the dugout, his teammates went quiet, the old baseball superstition that you never speak of a no-hitter while it's alive. No one sat near him. No one said the words. They just watched. Because this was bigger than a no-hitter. A no-hitter allows walks, errors, base runners. What Galarraga was throwing allowed nothing at all. Every batter up, every batter down. 27 men, 27 outs. A perfect game. In more than a century of Major League Baseball, hundreds of thousands of games, it had been done only 20 times. Rarer than a no-hitter. Rarer than almost anything in sports. And 2010 made it stranger still. That season would come to be called the year of the pitcher, and it had already produced 2 perfect games, Dallas Braden in May, Roy Halladay less than a month later. A third perfect game in a single season had never happened in the entire history of the sport. Armando Galarraga, the journeyman, the roster arm, the man fighting to keep his job, was now 3 outs from doing what no one had ever done. He would get 2 of those outs. The third would break him. And the man who broke it would weep. The 9th inning at Comerica Park did not sound like a half-empty stadium anymore. The people who were there stood and screamed for every pitch. The rest of the city was finding the game any way it could, televisions, radios, phones, as word spread that something impossible was happening in Detroit. The first batter of the 9th grounded out, 25 down. The second hit a fly ball deep to center field. Austin Jackson turned his back to the plate, sprinted toward the wall, and caught it over his shoulder at a dead run, a spectacular, championship-caliber catch that, on any other night, would have been the highlight. 26 down. 1 out to go. 1 out from perfection. The batter was Jason Donald. Galarraga came set, and threw. Donald swung and slapped a ground ball to the right side, into the hole between first and second base. Miguel Cabrera, the Tigers' first baseman, ranged far to his right, fielded it cleanly, and fired toward the bag. Galarraga had already broken off the mound, sprinting to cover first the way pitchers are trained to. He reached the base. He caught the throw in stride. His foot came down on the bag. The runner was a step behind. Replays would show it clearly. The ball beat him by half a stride. Out. The 27th out. The perfect game. Standing a few feet away was the first base umpire, a 22-year veteran named Jim Joyce, a man other players had voted one of the best in the game. Joyce spread his arms wide. Safe. For one suspended second, no one understood what had happened. Galarraga stood on the bag, the ball still in his glove, staring. And then he did the most unexpected thing a man can do when his one shot at immortality is taken away in front of the world. He smiled. A small, stunned, almost gentle smile. Not rage. Not screaming. Just disbelief, as if the universe had told a joke too cruel to be real. His manager was not smiling. Jim Leland charged out of the dugout. His teammates surrounded Joyce. But the call, on the field, was final. There was no replay review in baseball then. There was no way to fix it. Galarraga simply walked back to the mound and got the next batter out to end the game. A complete game masterpiece, with a hole punched through the middle of it. The replay was merciless. On every screen, in every slow-motion angle, the truth was obvious. Donald was out. Not close. Out. The most important call of Jim Joyce's life, and he had missed it by a fraction of a second. And here is where the story stops being about baseball. Jim Joyce did not hide. He did not bluster. He asked to see the replay himself, and in the umpire's room, still in his uniform, he watched himself get it wrong. Then he stood in front of reporters and said the words plainly, his voice breaking apart, "I just cost that kid a perfect game." He didn't blame the angle. He didn't blame the speed. He took a perfect game away from that kid, he said, and he didn't blame anyone a bit for anything that was said against him. He asked to see Galarraga in person. And when the young pitcher came, Jim Joyce, the respected veteran, the professional who had spent 2 decades getting it right, broke down and cried and told him he was sorry. Galarraga hugged him and forgave him on the spot. The call would never be changed. But what happened next changed the game itself. The next afternoon, the two teams played again. Before every game, someone from the home team carries the lineup card out to home plate and hands it to the umpires. Normally it's the manager. That day, the Detroit Tigers sent someone else. They sent Armando Galarraga. He walked out across the grass carrying the card, and there, working home plate that afternoon, stood Jim Joyce. The umpire looked up and saw the face of the man whose perfect game he had erased less than 24 hours earlier. And Jim Joyce, in front of the whole ballpark, began to cry again. Galarraga smiled and patted him on the shoulder. And the same crowd that had booed Jim Joyce with everything they had the night before, stood up and applauded. For the umpire, for the pitcher, for both of them, standing together at home plate. Meanwhile, the country argued. The commissioner of baseball, Bud Selig, held the power to fix it. With a single ruling, he could overturn the call and award Galarraga the 21st perfect game in history. Fans demanded it. Newspaper columnists demanded it. Even the governor of Michigan and members of Congress weighed in. Selig said no. To reverse one umpire's judgment call, he decided, would open a door that could never be closed, every disputed call in history suddenly up for appeal. The record would stand as it was called on the field. And so, officially, in the permanent record of the game, Armando Galarraga never threw a perfect game. Historians still disagree on how to count it. The record book lists it as a one-hitter. But many who love the sport quietly file it as the 21st perfect game, the one that was thrown and never granted. They gave it a name, the 28-out perfect game. Because Galarraga, in a sense, got 28 outs in a row, the 27 that count, plus the one that should have. And that missing out mattered more than any out that ever counted. Baseball history was full of famous mistakes. In the 1985 World Series, an umpire named Don Denkinger blew a call at first base that helped swing a championship, and spent years afterward receiving hate mail and even death threats for it. The game had always known its umpires were human. It had simply decided that was a price worth paying. For more than 100 years, baseball had guarded itself against technology. The umpire, fallible, standing right there in the dirt, was considered part of the soul of the game. Bad calls were tradition. You argued, you cursed, you lived with them. The mistakes were the point, some said. They made it human. Jim Joyce's tears cracked that idea in a single night. Because if the best umpire in the sport could blow the easiest call at the biggest possible moment, if a hard-working man could lose the achievement of a lifetime to the limits of the naked eye, then what, exactly, were we protecting? The debate that had smoldered for decades burst into open flame. And 4 years later, in 2014, Major League Baseball did something it had resisted for a century. It brought an expanded instant replay, a system that let managers challenge close calls and let the cameras decide. The very technology that had exposed Jim Joyce's mistake became a permanent part of the game, so that no player would ever lose a moment like Galarraga's to a human eye again. The scandal that should have poisoned 2 lives did the opposite. Galarraga and Joyce went on to write a book together. They called it Nobody's Perfect. And Galarraga? He never touched that kind of magic again. Within a few years he was out of the major leagues, a footnote, a piece of trivia. He is remembered around the world not for a perfect game, but for the perfect game he was never allowed to keep. Maybe that's the whole point. Baseball keeps its records because it wants to believe in perfection, 27 up, 27 down, a clean and closed circle with nothing left over. But the thing people actually remember from that night in Detroit isn't the pitching at all. It's a wrong call. An apology. A hug at home plate. 2 men choosing grace when neither one had to. We built a machine to make sure it never happens again. And still, the story we keep telling is the story of the night it did. So here's the question worth sitting with. If Jim Joyce had gotten the call right, if the record book read exactly the way it was supposed to, would anyone, anywhere, still remember the name Armando Galarraga? Follow for more.